No, Sunday morning. Due Saturday morning. Due Saturday. Due Saturday. No. Something wrong.
They're going to let you out of there for Christmas.
No, no, it's overspend. So it's not it's not money that's actually spent. It's money that's needed to build it. So the still, still, good on it. Fees for that and the salaries and everything like that. 35 million will help it. Well, they'll need it for the 35 million because you'll need it. The prices have gone up. Contractors, the price on 64%. We're at 4%. So it's
Well,
benefits
well,
and
how are you?
Hiya, not too bad.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone joining us online as well. This is the last public meeting of 2019, so you're all very welcome. We didn't have public meetings the last couple of months because of the elections, but the work of the board has continued, and indeed MLAs as independents have all been present at committees and doing a round of visits, so business has been as usual. We did have a private meeting at the beginning of December with the Chief Constable, and today some of the members will be wanting updates on some of the issues which we raised with the Chief in the last couple of weeks. And I think also people will want to know about any impact that the new neighbourhood teams are having. Very pleased that we jointly at this PSNI and NIPB were highly commended at the World Class Policing Awards for the work which they did on the local policing consultation, and that's really good news because a lot of hard work and effort went in, and it was a tremendous example of joint working. So it's good to see that the actions of that consultation are actually rolling out. We send best wishes to everybody who's involved in the negotiations and restoration of the Assembly. We hope that will get back to business as usual after Christmas, but as I've said here at the board, we've just continued to keep the work going. So we're going to move on now with the questions, and I'm going to start with, unless Chief, would you like to make a few opening remarks, and then we'll take some questions.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'll probably just worth saying a few really quick things because I'm conscious you want to get the most out of the hour. But some of it is just a few quick updates since we were last together. But firstly, Steve is doing a lot of work with the Department of Justice on the 3 key business cases that obviously some of you will discuss a bit later around the extra officers, the modernising estate and digital PSNI. So we're keen to see that progress over the next few weeks and months. Probably, the run to Christmas, it's worth reminding us we're still operating in a severe threat. Last time we were together, we just had the grenade attack. We've made 138 arrests for terrorism this year, so it just goes to show the strain that is still being put on both the PSNI and our communities. We're on the cusp of recruitment, which may come up today, but again, Steve's done a lot of work to try and modernise the approach, learn the lessons to see that we reflect some of the ambition to make the workforce more diverse. And I think the other thing, just to very quickly give some highlights, some interesting initial results from Operation Season's Greetings. So that's our pan-Northern Ireland sort of pre-Christmas crackdown, which is looking at drug dealing, drink drive, retail crime and domestic crime. So in headline terms, and obviously this may change as the next couple of weeks pan out, but I think reflection of patrol and enforcement, we've seen drink drive arrests go up by nearly a third, so we're just shy of 200 at the moment since the operation began. In terms of the effect on other things that we're looking at, early indications are that retail crime is down, which is good, but also domestic related crime is down. And you've probably seen sort of quite regular bursts in social media or the main media about a number of arrests for drug possession, drug dealing, which has been really good, both work by paramilitary crime task force, local officers, and also serious and organised crime. So it's just to try and give you some sense of the tempo at the moment where we're increasing visibility in the run to Christmas. So happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. We'll start then.
Thanks very much, Chair. Chief, I want to ask in particular around the organised crime and indeed the low level street. I very much welcome the focus on drug dealing, both at the strategic level and very much at the community level. Can I ask what evaluation that you will be undertaking in relation to that? Because I think many people know that the drug dealing at local community level is having the highest impact at community level and in competence and policing. And then maybe get a wee update in terms of neighbourhood team rollout, because I think the two are linked in terms of intelligence gathering.
Well, thank you. I think firstly we would want to bring back, I think, from the diary from about the February's board, a sort of more rounded and detailed sort of analysis of season's greetings in the round, Dolores, and that will obviously include the effect. I think we're just, at the last figures, there's been 88 arrests for drug-related activity through season's greetings, but we can bring that back. And I think what we probably want to sort of work with the board on is a broader conversation actually about the effect of the use of illicit and illegal drugs and the harm it causes to communities, because there's a policing dimension, but there's also obviously a health and wider social policy dimension. I was up at the Forensic Science Service on Tuesday, and really sort of quite interesting speaking with some of the scientists up there, what they're seeing in terms of changes in patterns of cannabis and its strength, but also the poison that is in some form of the illegal and false prescription drugs. What one was based on a cyanide type product, so it's quite horrifying what people are importing but also using, so as much as what we're doing. I think on neighbourhood policing, we're pleased with the rollout so far. You probably get your own sort of anecdote. I've sort of been able to get out and about quite a bit in the last 10 days or so, including the steepest bike ride I've had so far in patrol from Strand Road. But all the feedback from, I've been in the retail community and in other places is really positive. Seeing time in a couple of places with youth workers that are seeing that extra footprint and how that relationship is improving. But again, I think it's through the chair that as the rollout proceeds, how we can best update you both locally and across Northern Ireland about the effect it's having. Because I agree with you that that presence is key to controlling all sorts of crime problems, not just drug misuse, but right up to tackling terrorism, because I think presence in a conversation builds trust.
Chair, can I just one follow-up, because A&E colleagues tell us about the number of people being admitted either under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. Is there any collation of data in relation to that? Because a lot of police officers then are caught up in A&E. And then in terms of the broader public health education, is the Public Health Agency doing any work alongside yourselves about an education programme in the year ahead in relation to the strength of drugs? Because a number of young people have lost their lives after having taken one tablet.
I think working back, what we're in the early stages of is, I was only with Peter May yesterday from the Department of Justice, and obviously we've been working closely with them and Amanda, the Chief Executive, looking at what we talked about a few months ago, a broader community safety approach to a raft of stuff. So there's now a proposal, I think Dillon has come into the board this week, about setting up a task and finish group, which is cross-sector, to look at what's going to go into that pot, just those sorts of things, Dolores, that how do we work better together to call out some of these issues and deal with a more joined-up approach to these problems. But I think education is key. We get some sense of it from obviously forensic science and also what we see in custody suites, which is also a very live issue where the nurse service there is able to spot people that often aren't in the system and then start to refer them to treatment. And there's, as you probably get better than me with, there's a long-term, I suppose, social consequence to the troubles where people effectively self-medicate, and how that plays out in some of this as well.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, I trust there's not all downhill from here on, following your experience.
His bike ride was down there, he didn't do that bike ride.
Can I just at the outset wish you and your staff and all your officers a very happy Christmas and I trust a peaceful and a prosperous 2020, and thank you and your officers for the continued work that you do in keeping us all safe. I was particularly struck the other evening when watching the news in relation to the court case in Londonderry about the murder of little Kate McGuinness. And obviously we know that the case is now under appeal. However, it was very striking the human and the humanity that was shown by Detective Inspector McKenna. I want you, if you would, convey to him how much that resonated, I think, with people. That we saw a police officer who was very emotional, and obviously the impact that the investigation of serious crimes such as that murder has on your officer. but it was very much appreciated, and would appreciate if you could convey to him our feelings in relation to that. In your report that you've given to the board, Chief Constable, you make reference to the serious, ongoing, severe security situation. And it is extremely concerning when we see the increase in the number of paramilitary style assaults, 60 in the period of the last 12 months compared to 54. And obviously we were concerned, which underlines, unfortunately, the awful pariahs that we have in communities that are destroying communities. Linked to that, I would appreciate if you could give us some indication as to whether or not there are any terrorist links to the detention of a person in Turkey, which subsequently uncovered a considerable amount of arms. Were they destined for Northern Ireland? Were they destined for the hands of terrorists or criminals, or both? And what is currently the situation in regards to that investigation from a Northern Ireland perspective? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Meryn, and thanks for the kind comments, both generally, and we'll feed that back to the DI. So, well, firstly, in relation to the Turkey arrest, as far as we're aware, there is not a Northern Ireland footprint at the moment. It's an operation run from the southeast of England that is targeting organised crime, and it's a part of a series of interventions that come out of that investigation. So that doesn't involve us. I suppose the good thing was it was 50 odd firearms taken off the streets effectively by that. So that may be somewhat more reassuring for you, and obviously if that changes, we can brief it into the next meeting. Clearly the changes in the paramilitary type of assaults is a concern. There's sort of there's a push and pull in the figures because shootings are slightly down and assaults are up. But clearly it remains a concern. It's, as you say, Meryn, an odious crime. And quite how people think it's legitimate is beyond belief in a civic society, isn't it? So there's a few things that I think are probably interesting. That, in fairness, the Paramilitary Crime Task Force have just shy of 20 arrests now since September, so their operations have sped up a bit, frankly. So that's making small gains, I guess, against that sort of issue. I had a very interesting meeting with Father Martin McGill in Belfast last week through the Stop Attacks campaign that he's part of. So we have taken away to see, not just through the PSNI, but obviously often community groups, what more we can do to sort of turn people's heads round, really, and more cooperation and support. Because you'll be aware, usually the pattern of these is the crime takes place, we find out about it sometimes a few hours later, and there's very little cooperation. So we do struggle to gather evidence. Sometimes we'll make arrests, but to get sufficient evidence to charge is really difficult. So we've got to see how we can redouble our efforts there. In early January, we expect a report back from ACC Grey and the National Crime Agency. Because you remember a few months back, probably talked about this joint review we were doing about tackling organised crime. We await the findings of that. My anticipation will probably be some recommendations about how we get a bit more joined up, so we can effectively increase the cause and effect of our interventions and learn from good practice in other places. So I'd imagine with a fair wind we might be able to update again in February on what that means for us.
And thank you for that, Chief Constable. And I think one of the things that we were greatly struck when members of the board visited Grosvenor Road, and we had a briefing in relation to the Paramilitary Crime Task Force and the joined up working that there is with HMRC and with other agencies in terms of dealing with this. On the piece in regards to the recruitment of additional officers, something that was mentioned which I think was of value to take into consideration. Rightly, we have a focus on this board around community policing and getting officers out to be very visible and all of that. However, that will generate a considerable amount, we trust, of additional information which has to feed back into elements of your organisation, such as Paramilitary Crime Task Force. Are you confident that in terms of that overall piece in regards to recruitment, that it will be proportionate in relation to other elements of the service that I think are currently struggling? and probably the paramilitary crime task force is one example that could do more with obviously more resource, and will that play a part in the thinking of the overall recruitment piece to ensure a more effective and efficient police service, which will put these people who are destroying our lives rightly where they belong, behind bars?
Yes, I think it will, Meryn. I think the planning assumption at the moment, obviously we're going through different stages of a, sort of a managerial process. If we get past first base, it's out of the extra 800 or so officers, an assumption the bulk we could see going to neighbourhood policing, and I'm being deliberately vague because we need to do the proper analytics which Steve is working on at the moment. But I would agree that some of that increase should be put to tackling organised crime. Whether that ends up as more detectives or one other thing we've looked at, looking at Merseyside and Manchester, whether it be a more explicit, if you like, operational arm to the investigation side, so you can effectively go through doors quicker when you get intelligence. So that might be a redeployment of TSG, some of the TSG resources, for example, into a dedicated arrest team effectively. So we're looking at growth, but also the conversation Steve and I have been having is, as we get to the new year and through some of the processes and things in January, is what we do with existing resource differently as well, so we can exploit that intelligence and not have it set in our systems.
Thank you.
Tom?
Chief Constable, just to, if I could move to a different space, if you like, but I think it builds on something that Dolores raised with you. It relates to the project, which is rather wordy, titled Custody Healthcare Continuous Improvement Project. I think we could have found a nippier way of expressing that, which clearly is a huge issue for the police and indeed for people who are impacted by arrest and so on. We had a presentation on this excellent initiative at the Performance Committee in Musgrave Street on Wednesday. And really what struck me was it's a project that is achieving all of the targets set for it. And indeed I would suggest maybe exceeding many of them. And what's powerful about it, I think it has two sponsors. One is obviously the PSNI, but also very powerfully the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust. And therefore, I suppose in some ways trying to be current, at a time of headlines about crumbling public services and health and social care in crisis, I believe this project represents a beacon of light, offering an offender-patient model of care centered on their needs. And it does achieve authentic, cost-effective partnership, working in an area of significant risk for both the PSNI and the detained person. So I suppose my question is, when can we expect an announcement of a rollout of the project to other custody suites across Northern Ireland, where I believe it can transform the experience of detainees whilst alleviating pressure on hard-pressed hospital emergency departments and releasing scarce police resources to other pressing priorities?
Well, thank you, Tom. I mean, I'm glad clearly you've seen this initiative and how well it's started. And it does link to what Dolores was talking about, because I probably managed to get there about a week before you, I think, from memory, one of the trails, and I was talking to one of the nurses, and you probably did the same sort of conversation, that even that week, her personal experience was over 90% of the people that she was seeing had some form of drug misuse problem. So I do support it. We would like to see this rolled out from April. We are in a position where we could do that in terms of business process and an operating model. I think where we would welcome support from the board is encouraging effectively the Department of Justice and the Department of Health to sort of come together and agree the funding, because at the moment we can't afford it within the existing budget. The ask is just shy of 5 million, and probably a reasonable start place is a 50-50 split, but we can't yet get that over the line with both those departments, and so any encouragement and support you could give would be great, because we're stuck with that.
John?
Thank you, Chair, and can I, Chief Constable, start by extending my wishes also to you and the entire policing team for the period of the year ahead. Well, I ask you, Chief Constable, in light of the election results of last week and with the new GB government in place, and whether we like it or not, completely focusing on the Brexit issue, I would suggest some observers might comment that the timetables and plans set by the leadership of the incoming government are not consistent with realities around putting conclusive deals in place. And therefore, can I ask you, in relation to Northern Ireland, what impact the refocusing on Brexit has on current and future police planning and resources, if consideration is still being given to the possibility of no deal Brexit, and what impact that has going forward, particularly in relation to border communities and border police?
Well, broadly, obviously after the election, to steal a phrase from the Prime Minister, we did have an oven-ready plan because we've been here before. So once we were clear on the result, we've dusted that plan down. Only this week we've had offices in London with the Police Council looking to see are the arrangements valid, looking to see can we prepare, for example, the contingencies around mutual aid, but the balance of mutual aid, for example, around ponies, part of that. And only yesterday I was with people looking at the supply of body armour if we have to bring officers from other parts of GB into Northern Ireland. What we've done from learning from what we did in relation to the election itself, we had a dedicated assistant chief, what we described as Gold Northern Ireland, to pick up both the election but also related issues. There was a single way of doing things, and we've replicated that now for the first part of the EU exit running up to the end of January. So we've got George Clark, who had previously done the Brexit preparation, now in that role to retest the plans. There are obviously various scenarios we're looking at. Either, I think, I said at the start, the continuing threat from distant republicanism, but also the potential for protest, perhaps around ports and things like that, if the arrangements are seen to be adverse for Northern Ireland. We haven't had any direct contact yet with government departments to say what the exit terms for January specifically will be. So we await that clarity and then we can respond to that when we have it. But given where we are and as confident as we can be, what we will be seeking to do is come to the board in the next few weeks with approval for a bid for extra officers to supplement the 300 we've had this year, because I think our assessment is, it goes back to earlier comments on neighbourhood policing. A lot of those officers in the initial tranche have gone into the border area, and notwithstanding the EU exit as a trigger factor, if you like, the London crime, the sort of exit, people trafficking, all show that's still an area of concern for us. We want to make sure that doesn't get unsettled at the same time as maybe having to plan and prepare for protest in other parts of Northern Ireland and put more policing in and around the physical ports between and Wales and north of England. So we would like to have a conversation about that in the early part of January, but we are now giving it sort of a daily dust down to make sure we're ready for whatever comes.
Chair, if I could just come back there very briefly, and of course, I'm sure all colleagues will be willing to participate in those conversations, but is the summary of that therefore then that there's likely to be an additional short-term resource demand on yourself, Chief, and fellow officers?
I think we're assuming that, yes, because we need to make sure we have sufficient officers in the intelligence function and also build on the experience, particularly the recent experience of Labour police teams. I was in Carrickfergus on, was it Tuesday? They've run an operation only that morning up at the port at Larne, the multi-agency operation. So you can see perhaps the need on the planning assumptions we've got at the moment for more work with Borders Agency and Customs to support what they're doing. So it's really turning the lens that we talked about a few months ago from the border to the ports. So we will be asking for people. And it underpins, I think, the broader conversation we've had. I think the service is stretched. We know you're concerned about overtime, but that's a reflection of the fact we're having to continually team and label and flex the different demands because we frankly need more officers on the front line.
Thank you.
Shouldn't have mentioned the word overtime. There's going to be a question. Where's Wendy?
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, the issue of overtime remains a public interest and of an issue of scrutiny for this board. not least in relation to huge costs, but also in relation to the welfare of officers. We do know that a new strategy is being put in place. We're not yet seeing a trend, a downward trend of costs associated with overtime. What do you intend to do as we move towards another financial year in terms of dealing with that and increasing a more positive response to use of overtime?
Well, it does, as you know, Wendy, it does pick up a number of issues. I think a number of us, including myself, I think Steve and Mark Hamilton, have been in dialogue, for example, with the Federation around the wellbeing side, because you've got some parts of the organisation that are stretched and they are seeing weekend days off cancelled and then re-rostered. You might get away with that once or twice, but it becomes habit. It's not good for morale and it's not good for their health. Mark Hamilton is currently looking with fresh eyes on the implementation of police regulations to make sure that not only we're applying the rules, but we're applying it sensibly, and that's coming back at the end of January. I think the thing going into the planning for the budget for next year is what other hard choices we might have to make in terms of visibility and levels of service. So, for example, season's greetings that you're seeing at the moment, there was an overtime element to it, because we just need to get people out on the streets, and we may have to start saying an assumption for next year there was less pre-planned overtime for events like that if we have to live within our means. We're aware, obviously, from the tempo of the summer, there was also the parades and bonfires generated a pressure, and then a number of the terrorism investigations meant that we were running at full belt really, and we had no choice but to use overtime to keep the place going. So I know it's a concern, but it also, without sounding like a stuck record, if we had more officers, it would reduce the pressure, because over time there's plugs gaps.
Chief Constable, you mentioned in your opening remarks the issue around the new recruitment that's coming up, and also the business plans, which we're going to be looking at in a bit more detail this afternoon, one of which is around increasing the number of police officers. We've also had the comments in the press very recently from Archbishop Martin referencing the shortage in terms of representation from the Catholic community. We know that working class Protestant community, the LGBT other communities are underrepresented within the police force. I'm not going to go into the 50-50 issue. You've already stated publicly that that's an issue for politicians, but given the need to rebalance, shall we say, alongside that, the issue of getting the best people for the job, I'm interested to know what particularly is new in this upcoming recruitment campaign that will help bring those two issues together, provide a balance which is appropriate, whilst also ensuring we have the best fit for the people who join.
Thank you. Sorry. Well, I think it's probably fair. Steve's done an awful lot of work on this because he's our lead for the whole issue of representation. So probably to sort of let me have a glass of water and him to answer the question, because there is a lot of detail. It'd be a shame if I stole his thunder really. So because there's some quite more creative use of advertising and other outreach. But do you want to give a quick update on that?
Yeah. So obviously there are a number of external pressures that affect our ability to recruit in terms of representativeness. We have the enduring distant Republican threat. We have matters of legacy that actually our evaluations and our research shows us are quite toxic to encouraging some people from certain communities from joining. And obviously there's still the issue around cross political spectrum support for a policing career. So within that context, and we're always seeking to lobby government, lobby political parties to try and make progress in those areas, and we're always actively working to try and constrain the DR threat. We've taken the approach that our obligation is to do everything that we can within our gift as an organisation to create the conditions that allow people from right across the community to see policing as a viable career. So we obviously, with one of the confidence building measures out of patent, we have an external provider, Dillon. So I've been working with Dillon and our PR company about trying to be more comprehensive, more creative in relation to the upcoming campaign. So I have police and community safety partnerships have been invited to those, and some other community members that district commanders wanted to bring. We've discussed the issue, and then I commissioned a local engagement plan per district with right down to quite some operational detail that they have brought back, presented to me and the PCSP representatives, and we've had the ability as a collective team across Northern Ireland to feed into that. So they go right down to what schools are you going to engage with, what colleges are you going to engage with, how are you going to engage with members of the LGBT community, how are you going to engage with members from the ethnic minority community in those districts. And those engagement plans have been developed against the 11 districts and are available. We then have a more centralised comms plan that is going to roll into place with Deloitte and our PR company. It's going to be more social media based. This year all the research shows that the catchment areas we want to get into, that the place for investment is social media. And we're also for the first time going to organise a number of showcase events where we're going to actually, I suppose, put on a bit of a display, come to an event, either in a civic space or police space. The venues are still being generated, where we will have different parts of the organisation available. So if someone's thinking of potentially applying for the police, that they can come along and see the different disciplines at one place and what might a police career might entail. The final piece that we've done this year, and we're just, the membership's proceeding, just putting in place the final details around who's going to chair it for us, is an independent advisory group. And so we've identified 6 groups that we particularly want to recruit from. One is obviously Catholic, working class loyalist, female, ethnic minority, disabled, and LGBTQ. So we have representatives from each of those communities who are going to come together. We're going to try and see and get it independently chaired to generate ideas. That is not just for this recruitment campaign, but that is very much with an eye to the next campaign and the one after that. In addition to all that, obviously the Chief has been down meeting the church leaders, meeting other stakeholders and influencers, and we're, just yesterday I've been engaging with some of the business community. I'm going to ask the business community to lend their support when we go to the recruitment market, because clearly a well-resourced representative police service more likely to gain community confidence, create safer climate for people to invest in, people to do business in. So there's a common cause there between us and the business community, and certainly elements of the business community are going to lend weight to the call. So there's quite a comprehensive approach being taken this year. Previous years we have relied a little bit just on our PR company to, I suppose, advise us. This year we've worked much more collaboratively and I suppose led with the PR company to try and fill a lot of that space.
Just a follow-up to that, Steve. And maybe this is inherent within all that you're doing anyway. It wasn't referenced explicitly, but do you do much with regard to role modelling, actually identifying officers within the police force who would be role models for any of those groupings that you're talking about, and actually putting them up as leads to hopefully attract those from their communities into the force, because they see how well they've done with a career within the police force?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have discussed that as a group, and we have identified some role models we do have within the police service. We do have an ethnic minorities, an LGBTQ, and a female, and I'm not a senior moment here, one of the other minority liaison groups. And so they have been part of the workshops that I've held in UForge, and we're looking to identify, just as you say, role models to go to those showcase events. And certainly some of our social media will be when we're reaching out. We have to be subtle around that to some extent. Some of you will know that when people have put their foot forward in the past and led the way and shown that leadership, that they have become the subjects of attack and grievous injury. But we are doing that, and we're working through it.
Sorry, one final thing, Chair. In terms of the outcomes to all of this, have you set targets which will enable us to understand whether or not this recruitment drive has been successful? I know there are obviously high headline stuff in terms of the balance within the police force, but have you set yourself targets so that we know what success looks like at the end of this programme?
No, we haven't actually set any numerical targets. Obviously, our desire is to increase representation against those 6 particular groups. But very happy to discuss where our ambition is. Clearly, we're sitting at 32% Catholic at the moment. We have concerns that if our recent recruitment campaigns were to continue, that in a small number of years, our composition rate in Catholic would start to fall, which would be quite frankly a crisis for us in terms of community confidence. We have 29% female. We want to see that increase significantly. So obviously our ultimate ambition is we are a broadly divided community. I think our ambition should be to get to police service that is 50% Catholic and 50% Protestant. I've referenced external influences. We're working at those. But this year we've done a lot more ourselves to try and do what we can as an organisation to try and increase our representativeness and our ability to recruit from across those 6 diversity dimensions.
Yeah, just want a supplementary. Could I welcome the engagement that the acting deputy constable has put in place? It comes as no shock to any member of this board, I should imagine, that we still believe that 50-50 recruitment is an appropriate tool to use in such circumstances, is one which is recognised internationally. However, in terms of what it feels, once a person joins the police from the Catholic or Nationalist community, would the Chief Constable consider a cultural audit in terms of what it looks and feels like to be a serving officer within the police? You know, Chief, that our party has raised with you before the visibility of Catholic Nationalist police. I do hear what Steve has said in relation to those who did put their head up before and what happened. But nonetheless, I do talk to officers from the Catholic Nationalist community, and they do have some concerns about what it looks and feels like to be a police officer. So I would ask, not just in relation to a cultural audit in relation to that part of the community, but broadly, from a female perspective, from LGBT, I wonder would you give that serious consideration?
Yes, is the short answer, because Yvonne Cook is working at the moment to develop a new people culture strategy, because the current one is about to be life expired. So issues like that will sit within the strategy, so we get basically a baseline and see what people feel at the moment, and then areas where we need to improve, whether it's the appearance of the working environment, unconscious bias and all those well-rehearsed issues. But we'll certainly take that away and come back with a date when we're going to start that.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, this is an area we don't want to stray the board into the political arena. However, I think it needs to be made clear that 50-50 requires legislation. And from my party's perspective, there will be no support for reverse discrimination, because that's clearly what it is. But what I would like to get an assurance from Stephen on the back of his comments is that in the drive for the police service to tick a whole variety of boxes that there is in some quarters a public demand for, to a lesser or greater degree, that the focus will still remain ensuring that we get the right officers employed to do the job of a police officer, not to do the job of just ticking social issues that all looks good on an audit that's carried out by some organisation, when the reality is when a police officer is called, people do not really mind what their religion is, their sexual orientation is, or their background. They want to be absolutely sure that they have the competency and the capability of doing the job that they're employed to. And I think in this politically correct world that we live in, we always seem to lose the focus on the purpose and role of police officers. And that is to keep us safe, to ensure that our society is a safe society, and we won't lose sight of that.
No, I can reassure you, the process is a merit-based process, and there is a standard that all applicants have to reach. And you know, there are assessment centres, there are online examinations. It is a rigorous process because, as you rightly say, we need to ensure that the police officers that we recruit and train are capable of doing the professional job we want. On the other side, diversity is a really good thing, and we do want to be representative of the society we serve. I think that brings some benefits internally, culturally, and also in terms of community confidence and consent and support. So it's not one or other, it's both, and that's where our efforts lie.
Thank you, Chair. This is a specific issue, but it follows on nicely from the conversation we've just had around recruitment, because, as has already been alluded to, one of the most toxic issues within recruitment is the legacy issue. And I'm just wondering, Chief Constable, if you've had any conversations with the Secretary of State, or if you have any planned conversations around the establishment of the HIU, because not only in terms of the toxicity of the issue, but also in terms of the drain on your own resources around legacy, and you've alluded in previous conversations around the difficulty in getting other forces to take on investigations which have to be Article 2 compliant and therefore have to be independent of the PSNI. So I think that this is a massive issue, and it is an issue in terms of recruitment in nationalist and Republican communities, but also probably in working class loyalist communities. So I think that we do have to, I suppose, look at both in tandem, but it is a very specific issue, and I think the establishment of the HIU is vital. I know that we as a party have repeatedly raised it with the British government. I know a number of the NGOs and organisations who represent concerned groups have raised it with the British government at every level. So I'm just wondering what conversations you have had or plan to have with them.
Well, thanks for that, Linda. Recently, I haven't spoken to the Secretary of State because obviously with the election that's been difficult. But when he arrived, it was someone we both prosecuted quite hard to say, to the extent that he could help, can you take this issue off us? So we've been able to brief him, and we've been able to brief the head of the civil service in particular of the benefits we'd see in the way that you've articulated there. We are currently doing some high-level work with the Department of Justice on a what-if scenario. So if some of the 150 million that is linked to the Storm House Agreement were to be released, how could we use that to accelerate the establishment of an HIU in almost like a hybrid form? Because I think if we get there, there's varying views about how quickly you could go to full implementation. I know there's been some outline work done to scale it, to look at operating centres, etc. So that if there was obviously support politically to get it going, we realised we could move reasonably quickly over the next 12 to 18 months. But the short term is, can we use some of that money to ring fence what we're doing within the PSNI and actually speed up some of the investigations that wouldn't necessarily get into the space where you end up in conflict with people, to actually give that resolution to victims. So we're in active dialogue at the moment.
Does any of that work involve working with the Police Ombudsman's office? Because there was suggestions previously that that there could be some work done in terms of planning and I suppose training people up that would be in a position then to carry out the work within the HIU. Because obviously all of the work doesn't have to be done by people from a policing background, and I think you had alluded to that yourself previously as well.
Steve might be a bit more aware, but I'm not aware of any short-term conversations with the police ombudsman. I was only there last week myself. I think it's fair to say that the Department of Justice have commissioned somebody else to look at an operating model, which does rely on the fact that it wouldn't necessarily just be police officers in the HIU offer. It becomes people that have investigative experience and can evidence that. So that is part of the thinking.
Chairman, if I could go back to, I think, a very helpful and comprehensive reply given by the Deputy Chief Constable in relation to the organisation, structuring and targeting of the next recruitment initiative. I commend him for that. I'd also revert to my new pet project, which is custody suites. Bringing people from diverse backgrounds into police stations is a huge part of that as well. And I think when you can bring professional nurses, phlebotomists, doctors into that setting, it has an equally sort of unifying effect in terms of engagement and interfacing, as distinct from the old style police station where the public sort of came in great fear and misgiving. So I think bringing those parts of the dynamic in, again, is another huge benefit from building those custody suites across and replicating what's already happening in Musgrave Street.
I think we both agree, and we do have ambitions. The Chief has already answered your earlier question. We believe that what's happening in Musgrave Street is a really positive development in terms of custody healthcare. We have a very chaotic detained person population. We see high levels of addiction, suicide ideation, people with real vulnerabilities and real needs, and this provides a much more comprehensive joined up approach between ourselves and the health authorities. People who are getting earlier intervention that they maybe wouldn't have got for a much longer time when it's just police. So we do see it is a very positive development and want to roll it out. And I would just echo the appeal that the Chief made for any support that the board can give us to help us managing the funding arrangements.
Thank you. Garrett?
Thanks, Chair. Chief Constable, just to go back to your opening remarks in relation to the drink drive campaign and the drug drive campaign. It seems to me that there's been a lot of effort put in to raise the profile in the campaign around the dangers of drink driving and using drugs whilst driving, and despite the fact that too many families this Christmas will not have a loved one at their table because of a result of these traffic collisions, the result of those who drink and take drugs behind the wheel. You said the figures are up this year by a third, which is really concerning. I don't know if you have any thoughts on what else can be done, but do you have a specific figure as to how many arrests have been made during this campaign that you've run? But also, are there any trends in terms of the profile of those who have been caught and those who have offended in this way?
The most up-to-date figures, I think it's 195 arrests for drink driving. So that's up nearly a third. It's 44 more than similar campaign last year at this point in time. But obviously that gets updated each day. I think I haven't got figures in front of me in terms of the demographics, in terms of those people that are in that cohort of nearly 200 people. I think it's best probably bring that back what we do, the more comprehensive report about season's greetings in the round, because we look at victimology or other types of behaviour. I think it's one of these double-edged swords as well, because you saw Alan Todd launch the campaign a few weeks ago. So there has been a strong emphasis on enforcement this time. And sometimes, obviously, the more you find. So there's been morning breath test operations as well as responding to calls or doing enforcement in the evening, even last night in bad weather. So sometimes it's hard to tell actually, are you just catching more people because you're doing more, or is the behaviour changing? So I think it's probably wise to see at the end, has it calmed down, or actually we're seeing an even bigger rise in the arrest figures, what that means for us.
Yes, thank you. I think that concludes the questions from the board today. So thank you, Chief and Deputy Chief, for coming along and taking our questions. On behalf of the board, I want to say thank you to all of the PSNI officers and staff for the very good work which they do. And alluded to several of the questions, you can forget day-to-day policing, how hard they all work, but also to all of the emergency services pulled together to look after us and keep us all safe. And many of them working whenever we'll be off enjoying ourselves. So I want to wish you all very happy Christmas and a good new year. Our next meeting in public will be in February on Thursday the 6th. So thank you all very much and happy Christmas.
No.